Good morning, and thank you for being with us. On Tuesday evening, Arunan Arulampalam became a finalist in the race for mayor of Hartford, beating his two Democratic opponents in the Democratic primary. He'll now be taking on Republican Mike McGarry and a few other candidates who will be on that ballot in November. Arunan Arulampalam is joining me here in Studio 8 today. Thank you for being with us. Congrats on the victory.
It's good to be here.
So, in this primary, it's been talked about ad nauseum, but you beat two very long-time, well-known, established Democratic candidates. Obviously, I'm sure you have a lot of thoughts on how you got there, but what should voters take away from that victory?
Well, I think what's really important is that we got support in every part of the city, which kind of breaks the conventional wisdom that you take one neighborhood and you try to add a second neighborhood to it. We came in either first or second every single one of the 24 precincts, and I think it's because there are a lot of Hartford voters across the city who are buying into our vision for the future and also this message of unity, what we can be if we stand together as a city, if we can walk together as a city, we're so much stronger. And I think I've been really heartened by the fact that that message and then the shoe leather campaign of getting to people one by one and talking to people and building those relationships really paid off on Tuesday night.
And I want to talk about that vision. I want to talk about who you are as well. But let's talk a little bit more about the politics, because you're right. That has been the long philosophy is, focus on your one neighborhood and then maybe knock off one or two others. When you have to deliver the message in that primary campaign, I mean, the CT Mirror in their article on the primary said you're now the overwhelming favorite, which I think anyone who watches Hartford politics would agree with. So you're focusing on that primary day. You're trying to distinguish yourself from these people that have gotten votes and other things for a long time. Yeah. Is that message difficult to deliver? Is it the enthusiasm you bring? Like, how do you look at that from a political standpoint?
I think a lot of it is I think our message was really in line with what people wanted to talk about already at the doors. I've spent a lot of time within the community talking to people, and people want to talk about housing and investing in housing. People want to talk about their neighborhoods and investing in those old commercial corridors that existed in their neighborhoods, whether they're in the North End or the South End or the West End. And people want to talk about kids and the impact we have on kids. And that was kind of the core of our campaign message to begin with. But also, in Hartford, people want a mayor they can see and touch and feel, and the mayor so much becomes the embodiment of the city and the energy of the city, the vitality of the city, the hope for the future of the city. And so I think having a hopeful message, but also being out in neighborhoods and talking to people and letting them see and feel what it would be like to be the mayor of their city, I think had a really big impact.
All right, let's talk a little bit about who you are and how you got here. And it struck me when we had Mayor Bronin on, when he announced he was not going to run, one of the questions I asked him was, here's a white kid with fancy degrees who is a transplant to the city and had to convince the people here that they could trust him and like him and support him. You're kind of coming at it a different way. You're an immigrant. You've been in this city and really established roots before this. So what's the message about who you are that you want voters to know?
Yeah, I mean, I was born in a different country. I was born in Zimbabwe to parents who were Sri Lankan refugees. Have worked in the city for a little bit, but also am raising kids in the city, which is something Luke knows about as well. But raising kids in the heart of a neighborhood in Frog Hollow that in which we see the challenges day to day. We've got the only single-family home on our street. We're sending our kids to public school in the city, and I think those challenges that people feel on a visceral level, I feel on a really visceral level because I see it each and every day. But I think when you're in the midst of our neighborhoods, it brings so much hope. You see the resilience of the people of Hartford. You see the potential of the people of Hartford, and it brings you so much hope for what's possible in the future of the city.
Is one of the hurdles you have to overcome in convincing people is convincing them that it's possible? Because anyone who spends time in some of those Hartford neighborhoods, as any news reporter has, and I have over the last couple of decades, there's a lot of people who will look you right in the eye and say, you can't fix it. Yeah. Hartford is what it is, and it was this way with my grandfather, and it's this way now, and I'm never going to get out of this neighborhood. Does the possibility, is that part of what you have to sell?
Well, I think that possibility is so obvious when you live in a neighborhood. And so part of it is creating the opportunities, the ladder to opportunities for people who already live in the city of Hartford, opportunities to good paying jobs, opportunities to build home ownership, to build small businesses. And so, one of the things I talked about was how do the residents that are already in Hartford how do we put them at the center of the redevelopment of our city? How do we put them at the center of the revitalization of our city? So we're not just changing buildings, we're actually impacting the people and the ability to create wealth within our residents. But then, I think that showing people what is possible in Hartford is just as important, and there's no better way to show them than to actually start to do the work, and I think Luke has done that over 8 years. I'm sure that making the case now to some of our friends in the suburbs that Hartford is central to the success of the region is not as hard as it was 8 years ago. But I think that work has to continue. Each level of each bit of progress we have is so fragile. And so continuing to build on the success of our downtown and bringing people in to a downtown that's increasingly vibrant, increasingly buzzing is so important. And then stretching that out into our neighborhoods and making sure that in the places where most Hartford residents live, people feel safe. They see real investment. They see bookstores and coffee shops and restaurants popping up, and that we allow residents the ability to be at the center of that.
Your current job is as the CEO of the Hartford Land Bank,
Yeah.
and one of the things that organization does is try to encourage local people to look with more developer eyes on the city. Is that something that you would, I know you've said you'll step down from that role if elected,
sure.
but is that the kind of philosophy? You've talked a lot in our few minutes here together about investing.
Yeah.
Is it getting the people in those neighborhoods to invest? Is that one of your big priorities?
Yeah, I mean, what I realized, and the reason that I went to the land bank is there's so much potential with folks who live in neighborhoods already, who live in the city of Hartford already, who've got some construction skills or got a little bit of business expertise. And if they could put those tools together, and if we could train them, and that's what we did through this training program that's the first of its kind in the nation, to be able to take on a property, to redevelop it, and to build businesses, build wealth off of that, then as we are pouring money into redeveloping properties, all that money goes to building wealth in our neighborhoods, and that property pipeline is a lot more sustainable because we've now built up a bench of people who can redevelop our neighborhoods from within and then build wealth off of that. And that is the core of the vision for Hartford. It's how do we build a middle class again? How do we talk about, yes, we've got challenges today that we've got to address. We've got food insecurity issues. We've got healthcare issues. We've got real poverty in the city. But how do we address those issues in a way in which in 20 years we're not talking about the same issues, we're not sitting in the same place and trying to deal with the problems of today, in which we're really stretching out into a vision of tomorrow.
I do want to ask you about one of the other problems of today, and that's the violence in the city.
Yeah,
and
sure.
we've had the mayor talking about it. We've had the police chief on talking about it. It has seemed to be at an inflection point where there is an increasing amount of violence, and a violence that is largely affecting people outside of maybe certain areas where we've seen it in the past.
Yeah.
How do you deal with that as mayor?
Yeah, I mean, it's something that I've seen on my own block, and so it is something that I know residents feel viscerally. And we've got to create opportunities for all of the kids growing up in our city to choose a different path. And so I've talked about creating an Office of Violence Prevention, in which we coordinate efforts between our nonprofits who are dealing in violence prevention, our police, our schools, because sometimes it's teachers or principals that spot the warning signs first, or DCF, in which we coordinate those efforts to ensure that those who are most likely to offend, they're people who have faced real trauma, people who maybe have been victims of violence themselves, that we are intentional about layering resources onto them, getting them on a pathway towards towards something productive, and that means jobs, and that means real mental health resources, so that we can prevent violence before it starts. I think it also means continuing to rebuild the relationship between our police department and our community, and getting cops walking a beat in the city again, getting them out of cars and building relationships in the communities. And that's something, as mayor, I've said I would walk a beat with some of those cops and convey a very different kind of relationship between our police department and our city. And then, creating safe spaces for kids to go to after the school doors close at 3:30 and certainly all summer long. There's so few options for so many of our kids. And so I want to reopen our neighborhood schools at night and during the summer, create really robust sports and rec programs in every single neighborhood, create real music and arts education, and engage our kids, get adults feeding into them in their lives, and create productive outlets so that they don't have to choose between home and the streets.
Well, you were quoted, our partners at CT Insider quoted you as saying it was an unpolished gem, the city of Hartford. I think people hopefully can get a better idea of what you meant by that. Long general election still ahead. We got a ways to go, but the Democratic nominee here, Arunan Arulampalam, we appreciate you being with us here on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks very much.
I appreciate it.